Q&A, and I'm going to call on you, and then I'm going to repeat the question so the whole audience can hear it, and then Eva will respond. So I've lost all track of time. Is it midnight? Somebody just give me a little quick. 8. Oh, 25, okay. We did go a while, didn't we? Questions. Let's see, right there in the red. Oh, Jen. Jen, by the way, is playing Muti, her mother, in the play, and she played Muti in the play we had at the Appleseed Community Theater.
I played it several years after this, but I'm brave enough now. So you and your mother were in hiding together for quite a few months.
2 years.
2 years. I understand that was a time when you were very close to your mother, but I imagine you were also very frustrated with each other.
Yes.
Wait to answer, till.
After being in Auschwitz, when you found your mother again after she was very sick, and I know you looked after her and cared for her, do you think that relationship, the tension of being in hiding, how do you think that affected your relationship with her?
Okay, she's saying that Eva and her mother were in hiding together for 2 years, got on each other's nerves, as you can imagine, and then they were in Auschwitz together, and her mother ended up being separated from her, and she was ill, and she's wondering how that did the tension of the 2 years of hiding affect your relationship later?
Well, of course, it was a difficult time to be in hiding with one person, and I was an outdoor child. I wanted to go and play, and my mother tried to teach me things, which I was a very bad pupil, so she lost her temper with me, and I started to cry, so it didn't work at all. But nevertheless, we loved each other and we looked after each other. So there was no tension whatsoever. That was forgotten, the difficulties, and going through the camp together, this terrible period, was of course made us much, much closer. But what became a little bit of a tension was when she was married to Otto. He was definitely number one to her. And I was a bit jealous of that. So I told her sometimes off that, I want to have you as well a bit. And because when they came to stay with us, they did all the letters. Otto did never write a letter by himself. My mother typed it for him. And they discussed every sentence, how to write it. And when they came to stay with us 3 months a year, they always got all the letters sent over. And so I had planned with my mother I would go to town or to a film or something. But then the post came and Otto said, Putzele, that's how he called her. First we have to do the correspondence, and then the day was finished. So I did resent that a little bit. And I told my mother, and she said, don't tear me apart, I know, I love you, but Otto needs me more than you need me now. Well, perhaps that was true.
Okay, any other questions? She's already answered almost everything, hasn't she? Right here.
How did your children feel when they first heard your story?
She wants to know how Eva's 3 daughters felt when they first heard her story.
Well, they were actually very upset that I didn't tell them earlier. And the only thing how I was going to tell them was through my book. So when I wrote the first book, Eva's Story, I gave them all a signed copy, dedicated. It's
That was nice of you.
Well, I dedicated it to them even, And, well, for the future, it's nice to have my signature.
Oh my goodness. You got an answer. Okay, others? Any other? Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, go. I can't see you, so just it's kind of, I think, two questions. Have you been back to Auschwitz, and what was that like? And then, did you ever find any of the families that had hidden you in Amsterdam, correct? And what was that like?
Yes, as I told you, we were at many different places in hiding, and some we were only a short time, and I don't remember that I went to visit those, but where we were longer, we did go, we had contact. But then, of course, I moved to England, but my mother was, well, she was in Holland, and they moved actually to Switzerland, but each time they went to Holland, she was in touch with those people. And Auschwitz, yes, I had no intention to ever go back there, but in 1995, when it was the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and it was a big memorial service there with all the world leaders going there, and the Dutch television asked me to do a program with them. And first I said no, but then I was thinking it over, and I thought, well, perhaps I remember it too terrible, so if I go back, perhaps I can finish it, my closer circle. And as well, some of the veterans from the Russian soldiers who were liberating us were going to be there. And I was going to say a proper thank you to them. So that was, I did go, and it was a very emotional. I went with my husband, and the minute we got out of the car and saw it was in winter, and it was gray and cold and horrible looking. And my husband burst into tears, and the whole time we both cried through the program. It wasn't I don't think it was very successful, to crying people trying to tell something. It was only 6 minutes. But 4 years ago, German television asked me to do a program with them as well for Holocaust Memorial Day, and by then I'd spoken about it, I'd been visiting Germany as well, and I did go, and it was a very wonderful program we did, and the German people keep on seeing it on television. It's shown quite a few times, and I think it is very important. And last year I did a television program in Auschwitz, again the same thing, with a Japanese television group. And I was quite interested. I'd been in Japan before, and we do know about the terrible behavior of the Japanese prison camps, just as cruel as the Germans were. And when I went to Japan some years ago with an Anne Frank exhibition and the play, they were charming, amazing. They always bow, they give you presents all the time, they treat you as if you were royalty. And I said, how do those, that doesn't fit together, this cruelty and now this polite, lovely treatment. But the people who were filming was a woman, she was really a tyrant. She said, at 6 o'clock we are starting. And I said, no, we just come to Krakow. I can't get up at 6 o'clock, being ready in Auschwitz. Yes, 6 o'clock we have to start. I said, 6:30, 6:15. And then in the whole day as well, it was January, in the cold she took me, and I said, look, I'm freezing, we want to go back in. No, looked at her watch, another 2 hours. And then she took a hotel in Auschwitz. And my daughter was with me, and she said, I don't want to go in a hotel in Auschwitz. Yes, I've booked a hotel, and that's where we are going. And I must say, and the film is fantastic.
You are fantastic. Goodness sakes. Question, over here.
I wanted to go back to the topic of your daughters and ask you if you feel that they have a role in telling their story in the future, and how can they do that best? They can never replace you, of course, but what about the next generation and your children in that part?
Okay, she's talking about your daughters, and they're the next generation, and she's wondering if they will have a role in telling your story later. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Pardon? Oh, and, yeah, you have 5 grandchildren. Will your daughters and your grandchildren have a role in telling your story later?
Well, that is a big question. I don't really know, you know. This is a big organization, even called Second Generation. Some people belong to it, some already have taken over to tell the story of their parents if they are not alive anymore. With my children, I have a bit of doubt, because, you know, they didn't know my story. They were overwhelmed with the story of Otto and Anne Frank. And you can hear too much as a child. Especially my youngest daughter, Otto he was a wonderful grandfather, you know, I have no criticism. But whenever they did something wrong, he called them aside and told them, you know, Anne would have done it this way. And he told them about Anne all the time. But he didn't tell them who it was. He didn't tell us that it was his daughter who had died. And they were, you know, as little children, they didn't get it. And they really were feeling very uncomfortable. My daughters never wanted to stay alone in the house of my parents. They said, it's spooky here, you know? And so I don't know if they would be willing to carry on. I don't know, we'll have to see. But as well, you know, when Otto was alive, that was his story. He didn't want anybody to tell Anne's story, anybody but him. When Miep Gies, who was one of the helpers, she wrote a book about her experience helping the family. She only wrote it after Otto had died. And the other helper, Mr. Kuchler, who emigrated to Canada, he started to write his experience helping the Franks, and he sent a chapter to Otto, and Otto was furious about it. He said, that is my story, that is Anna's story, you can't tell that.
My goodness.
Yeah, he was sort of possessive of that, you know? And so, you know, there are a lot of problems connected with that. So about my children, I don't know. With my grandchildren, I'm much easier talking about it. And there is a chance one grandson and one granddaughter is quite interested. But if they're going to take over, I don't really know.
Terrell?
Eva, did you suffer post-traumatic stress disorder? And how do you think the country of Germany has handled honoring the Jews since the war?
He's wondering if you experience post-traumatic stress syndrome, and how do you think the Germans have handled honoring the Jews since the war?
What have I not
Okay, the
one?
first thing, did you
Yes,
have...
I understand.
Okay, how do you think the Germans have handled honoring the Jews since World War II ended?
Yeah, but the first question, I don't know, stress. I certainly had stress, but but you know, very often people did ask me, didn't you have counseling? I said, counseling in Europe in 1945 didn't exist. So no, you know, I know in America it became very popular and we had Freud, but
You are hilarious.
But I have never heard that any Holocaust survivor went to counseling. So no, definitely we had to try to sort it out ourselves. And
How the Germans have handled honoring the Jews?
well, they certainly paid their debt in money. You can't, of course, pay lives for money, but they certainly felt guilty and accepted the guilt. And they certainly helped the building up of Israel. Israel would never be what it is now if it wouldn't be with the German help. Austria, on the other hand, which were even worse Nazis and treated the Jews even worse, I would say they were victims themselves. So a very bad attitude. And as well, Germany, I think now with a refugee problem, it's the only country in the world who has taken, well, over 1 million refugees in. So, you know, that is quite amazing. So, and I think that is partly as well because they don't want to make a mistake again. So they've definitely become more humane and are very, very sorry. Nevertheless, there are, of course, Nazis still in Germany, but the majority of the population and the young people are really, really, really very upset about what their country has done.
We're going to just have a couple more questions. Oh, I can't see you. I don't, that's a political question. I don't think you, I don't think.
Well, it's relevant in that if you don't want to repeat history, that's my point.
All right, she's talking about what's going on between the Christians and in the Middle East, the Palestinians and the Jews and the Christians. Do you want to talk about that, or let's move on?
Well, you know, I think we all admit it is a problem, and if both sides are not cooperating, there will be problems for many, many years to come. We just hope and pray that the two sides will come to their senses, like in Ireland. I always used to think Ireland and Israel is similar, different problems, but still hating each other and don't want to cooperate together. But Ireland have found a solution. Perhaps Israel will be sensible enough, the Palestinians and the Israelis, to find a solution there. So that's all what we can hope for.
Okay. Okay, go. Okay, how did you become reunited with your mother in the camp after that separation?
How we were reunited?
How were you able to reunite with your mother in the camp?
Well, you know, the Germans fled, most of them, and the gates were open in part. You could go from one part of the camp to the other, which was impossible before. And the people from our Dutch transport had seen my mother alive in another part of the camp, and they told me that. And I didn't want to believe it. I thought they'd just tell me that to cheer me up again. But it was true, and I tried to get to this part where they told me my mother was, and indeed she was, and it was his cousin who had saved her. When I wrote my book in 1986, my mother was still alive, and I wrote those stories in the book, and the publisher said, let your mother write it. And so she wrote 3 chapters, exactly what happened to her, how experienced what has happened, which is really an amazing read. She was 40 years old, and walking to the gas chamber, she prayed that at least her children would be saved and be alive. And she was ready to die, and she lived till 93 years. So, you know, quite an amazing story.
It is amazing. I think we'll just have time for right here.
I read your book when I was 13 years old. It stayed with me my whole life. And I've often wondered what happened, what the fate was of 2 people who played very important roles in your story. What happened to the man who betrayed your family, and what happened to your mother's cousin who was able to make the best and save your life?
Okay, which book did you read when you were 13? Eva's Story. She read your book, Eva's Story, when she was 13 years old. It stayed with her all these years, and she has questions about 2 people in the book. One is the person who betrayed who betrayed you.
Yeah.
And then the other question is your mother's cousin who performed miracles for you.
Yeah, but the nurse was known as a spy from the resistance. You know, she had a fiancé who always gave her the people to hide, and he was a very important member of the resistance. And when he became suspicious of her, she denounced him, and he was shot. So this kind of people those were. And she got, after the war, only 4 years. My mother had to be a witness. And I wanted to go, and she said, no, we don't want any children. And but she told me she was not at all sorry for what she done, and my mother said she wanted to attack her. She said she had to hold her back. She was so upset about it. And
then your mother's cousin.
And
who
my
helped
mother's
you.
cousin. That's quite an interesting story. There was a big family from Czechoslovakia, and there were 8 siblings, and there was an older mother, and they all got visas to go to Palestine, which was exceptional, because it was British mandate, and they didn't really want, the Arabs didn't want Jews. That's why not all the Jews who wanted to go could go there. And even after the war, so this is well a horrific, terrible story of the British. People who were in Germany, in displaced people camps, didn't want to go back to Poland or to Russia or even to Holland and stay in Germany, and many wanted to go to Palestine, and the British didn't let them. And there were ships, we were not really strong enough to go at the sea. They still used them, and the British Navy caught them and sank them, and the Jews who were near Palestine were taken to camps in Cyprus. Terrible, terrible story. There's a beautiful book called Exodus. And but your story is about Minnie. So she, her siblings went to Palestine, which was very lucky, with her 2 boys. And after the war, and she did survive the death march because she was very strong. And after the war in 47, eventually, she did go to Palestine to be reunited with her 2 sons. And in the 48 war, the youngest son was blown up on a mine. And she never got over that, and she died soon after that.
You've been sitting here for 2 hours, and we have refreshments in the lobby, and we have Eva's books are on sale, and she'll be doing a book signing. And so let's just give her a huge